Today, our special guest, Joseph O, will be sharing on steps 6 and 7. And I really look forward to hearing on that, because those are steps that should really be in our toolkit or ammunition closet every single day or whenever we need them. Before I turn it over to him, if you would like to check out Reco12, you could go to Reco12.com. You can donate a seventh tradition via PayPal or Venmo. That's Reco12.com/support. And that helps cover the cost of Zoom and our technology stuff. If you would like to share on Afro-Euro Reco12, I am looking for more speakers. I will post my number in the chat. Please hit me up. I've kind of gone through my first short list. I'm looking for more speakers, more people who have experience, strength, and hope. Again, we've had DA, we've had GA, we've had it all, and we'd love to have more. I'll post my number in the chat. Similarly, at Reco12.com, you could hear amazing other shares from the Afro-Euro time zone or around the world. And if you'd like to, try and share a 2 to 3 minute share, you could do that there, and we could check you out. But I'm really happy for anyone to contact me directly, whether that's for fellowship step 10s, if you need help with sponsors or sponsees, and specifically to share on this meeting. Without further ado, thank you, Joseph Owen. Thank you for being so generous to share with us last minute. Always of service, always on. Thank you.
Sure thing. Hey, Karen. Hi, my name is Joseph Owen. I'm a recovered alcoholic living here in Jerusalem. And thank you, Karen, for the opportunity to share and participate in my recovery. And I hear you thanking me, and I acknowledge that, and that's nice and everything. But it really, for me, it's an investment in my recovery. The more I'm involved, the more I step up and, take part in my own recovery. Sometimes the person who needs to hear what I have to share most is me on any given day. Something's going on or whatever, and, I'll share on it, and I'll realize, that's actually the solution to the problem that I've been struggling with, and that's the way God sorts it out, right? I trust in a higher power today that orchestrates things in a way that better than I ever could, right? For me, with my own limited purview, I got to search around the world and consult with a bunch of different people and post in the sober chats. What do you think I should do? What do you think I should do? Right? What's going to happen there is that I'm going to get 7 answers, which I'm going to have to use a broken brain to choose from, right? So it's not going to be helpful to me at all, But if I trust in God, and I make myself, a vessel for blessing, right? I believe that's true for me today. That the best thing that I can do is just make myself, a valid vessel to encompass whatever God sends to me. And so last night you texted me, great, okay, fine. I had the morning open for particular reasons today, and so it worked out. All right. So I want to take this as a standalone, even though I want to kind of leverage off of some things we've been talking about in my own book study on these steps. But fundamentally, it comes to let's talk about what the problem is, right? What brought us here? What brought us here was some kind of substance addiction or process addiction or struggling with something. Essentially, a couple of things were happening. One, the consequences were getting too great for our behaviors, right? In some regard, right? The cost was too much, or threat of lost relationships or status or whatever it is, and that could be with alcohol, drugs, relationships, food, across the board, gambling. Even though somebody quoted it, and I haven't checked this information, I heard it 2 days ago. There's something like 100 different fellowships that model after the 12-step recovery model, but they all have the same top of the pyramid, right? The 12-step hasn't changed. Right? It says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, tried to carry this message to other addicts, other sufferers, and to practice these principles in all our affairs. It doesn't say anywhere within the steps themselves that you're going to, stop doing whatever it was that you were doing, right? So therefore, it seems like a not very good solution for why I came here. If my problem was drinking, right, and I'm looking at the steps, it doesn't say I'm going to stop drinking. Why should I do them? Somebody else comes with a food addiction, right? It doesn't say they're going to stop, eating against their will, right? Why should they do it? Because a spiritual experience, right, if I can catalyze and maintain a spiritual experience, it will alleviate the pressures and the need to act out in that regard. Sometimes against my will after, I imbibe or what it is. But prior to that, right, if I was living a life that demanded the need for alcohol, I would be drinking now. That's just the way it is. right? You know, and often when I talk to some of my newcomer sponsees, I'll say, you know what? If I lived in your world, man, I'd be drinking, right? You know, I don't live in that world. We live on the same planet, but his is a world where he can't trust people. You know, he has anxiety, pressures. He has to manage things. He has to get his mom off his back. He's got to, you know, work a job. He doesn't have any trust in the larger forces, right, that are going to, you know, sort things out. So therefore, he has a lot of pressure on his shoulders, and he needs a drink. Or when he puts the plug in the jug, right? So now he's restless, irritable, and discontented, which the doctor's opinion says is the default state of the alcoholic, right? Any of us, you know, once we stop with our, you know, our addictions, our, you know, the thing that will alleviate them or at least calm them down, you know, that we exist in, you know, being restless, irritable, and discontented, unless, right, we have something to counter that. And there's two ways to treat that, right? And, you know, let's just talk tachlis, as they say, you know, just the bottom line. There's two ways to treat being restless, irritable, and discontented, right? One is drinking, right? And the second is a spiritual experience. And the, you know, I mean, there is a third option, unfortunately, mentioned in our big book, that, you know, at a certain point, some people have taken their lives because they couldn't deal with the pressures of reality. A lot of people come in with a you know, a misguided belief that, you know, AA is designed to help us, you know, deal with our drinking, right? That is not what it's meant to do, right? I don't drink anymore. I haven't had a drink in a long time. I don't have a drinking problem. AA is designed to allow us to deal with our sobriety, right? Having nothing in my body, right, chemically induced, right? How do I deal with traffic? How do I deal with, you know, people that wrong me? How do I deal with the pressures? You know, my country's currently in a war, right? The stresses of the, you know, missiles coming, and, you know, and fears and anxieties potentially, right? How do I deal with that, right? I can reach for a drink, right? And that will work, you know, in a limited capacity, but it has, you know, it has a cost associated with it. Today, I'm not willing to pay that cost. I'm not afraid of a drink, right? You know, that's not how it works. I'm not willing to have the consequences come to me of taking that first drink. So the real problem, right, was never drinking, right? If drinking was my problem, okay, I could move to a location where they don't have alcohol. Lynchburg, Tennessee is a dry county in Tennessee where they make Jack Daniels, right? Oddly enough, the country is dry. You cannot purchase alcohol within the limits of Lynchburg, Tennessee. Therefore, I could solve my problem by moving to Lynchburg, right? We could all do that, right? Let's pick up and move to Lynchburg. Or we could go settle, you know, in the north somewhere, right? We can all pick up, settle in a community, no drugs, no alcohol, we're all good, right? Yeah, you will notice that the murder rate goes very high, right? Because you don't have any non-drinking alcoholics, right, who can't deal with one another, right? You'd have a lot of restless, irritable, and discontented, you know, people smashing their cars into each other and whatever, right? Not alcohol-induced whatsoever. So here's the real problem. The problem was never the drinking, the drugs, the substance. And last night I was talking about it. I could cover it at different time. Just to make note, I think there's three different stages of my recovery, of a recovery, right? There's the beginning stage, right? The person who comes in wants to be counting days, right? Days away from a drink, days away from a drug, wants to get to meetings, right? To keep us away from the substances and whatnot, wants to take in some information, get some numbers, make contacts, right? But they exist in an area where they have yet to really start, you know, working on themselves and getting the program under their belt, right? So they're pushing away against the drug, you know, hiding out or whatever. And that's why a lot of people put in the chats, I really need a meeting right now, right? I used to write back, what you really need is a program, right? But, you know, a meeting is a good place to hide out for an hour, right? Well, in person, you'd at least get coffee and cookies. But, you know, now, I mean, I guess you could, you know, Zoom in for a while. But the thing is, that's the first stage of recovery. The second stage, we start to realize that, you know, it's our character defects and our separation from God, from self, from others that really was the primary cause of our acting out. We're not undereducated, you know, morally. We know bad from good, right? We know that certain things are bad for us, right? That's been true for me for a long time. It's just that the pressures of my life were so great that I had to transcend, right, my moral, you know, line, and do whatever I had to do in order to have that drink, right? And it cost me girlfriends, it cost me jobs. You know, anybody who's found themselves in these rooms, probably if you sacrificed your self-respect at one point, right, and did things that you weren't proud of or whatever it was, right? You crossed that line, not because you weren't aware of the line, but because you didn't have the power not to. And so I boiled it down, you know, if you want to take this as a walk away now that we don't have the substances as an issue any longer, right? I would say that, like, are you making promises to yourself that you're unable to keep? Something to that regard, right? That you're not going to call that ex-girlfriend. You're not going to spend that money that you don't have, right? You're going to swipe the card and hope by the end of the month that, so God comes along with a bag of money to cover things for you or whatever it is, right? Or, you make promises that you want to crack down on something or accomplish something and you're not able to keep them. That's the real problem, okay? And the thing is, why is that true, right? Because within me, I have these things operating called character defects, okay? So I'll just cover that briefly and how the steps address them. The first 3 steps are gonna reconnect me with God, okay? I distanced myself from God at one point in my life. We all have. Maybe we never met God or whatever it is. We didn't believe in God. We didn't think we needed God, whatever it was. The first 3 steps take me from a state of being selfish and self-centered to a state where I'm going to turn my will and my life over to the care of God in step 3. Okay, I'm joining the God team, right? You can look on pages 62, 63 to see how that's modeled in terms of God being the director, God being the father, God being the principal, God being an employer. Okay, great. Then step 4 through 7, right? I'm going to take a look at myself. I'm going to meet myself maybe for the first time. I'm going to do my pick up a pen and do my inventory. I'm going to share it with somebody. 6 and 7. Going to be aware of the character defects. And step 6, which I'd like to cover today, is to be willing to let go of these character defects. And step 7, to make active steps to shed them. And then 8 and 9, I'm going to reconnect with my fellows. But the thing is, these 4 through 7, right, which I'm pitching to you, that are where I introduce myself to self. I begin to become aware that I'm a human being, right? If somebody does a good step 5, if I have a good sponsor, he's going to listen to my 4th step. He's going to, give me active feedback on things I may not have considered as far as my character defects go, connect the dots in my life, right? That maybe I have a resentment against my parents, that they didn't educate me right, they didn't love me, mom didn't hug me enough, whatever it is, right? All kinds of things, Sherry Rosenthal in 3rd grade gave everybody a Valentine and not me, and that hurt me and whatever. The reason why that's an issue, right? It happened in 3rd grade because that same feeling of being marginalized exists for me today. Potentially, it's a hot button that could be activated today, not by Sherry Rosenthal, because I think she lives in Orlando now, right? We went to high school together, but whatever. It has nothing to do with her. It has to do with that feeling of being marginalized. And that's a product of character defects, of feeling that I'm less than and whatever it is. So these are the kind of things that are going to come out in the 4th step. A good sponsor is going to give me active feedback, add to the character defects, is going to, give me some things to think about. And then he's also going to basically welcome me to the human race. Joseph, you're not unlike other people. I have my character defects. You have your character defects, right? Nobody's perfect. We're all here to just, do the best that we can with God. So now I'm aware of my character defects. A simple list, right, is the classic 7. Pride, lust, anger, greed, gluttony, envy, sloth, right? That covers a wide range of things. But you can, there are others, right? Some character defects that you want to shed, right? Proclivity to overspend, to gossip, right? These are sourced from things, Why would I do that? Because I feel good about myself. I feel better if I make other people look worse, right? There's a natural thing to it. But it doesn't work for very long, right? Again, it's like drinking, right? It only helps for a little bit. Or eating a chocolate cake as opposed to a healthy, salad meal, right? Feels good for a couple minutes, but you can't go around eating chocolate cake all day, right? Because it's bad for you in the long term, right? So we had to model over to an adult version of the world, right? Being childlike, right, in our viewpoint doesn't work for a long time. Just because I turned 18 and had the ability to vote and be drafted into the Army didn't mean I reached adulthood, right? I don't believe that I reached adulthood until well into my sobriety, where I started to see that actions have consequences, that I am the primary source of the drama in my life, right? I used to perceive that it was bad luck, right? My ex-girlfriend pointed it out to me once, actually, because I always one time I showed up to her sorority house covered in blood because I got into a fight walking from my fraternity house to her sorority house. And I kind of picked a fight with a local townie guy, and he hit me in the head with a blackjack. So I show up at her sorority house covered in blood. And I was like, like whatever. He jumped out, he attacked me, this and that, right? And I said, things happen. And she's like, but why do they always happen to you? And you know what? I didn't connect that until many years later, that it was like, yeah, I kind of set myself up for those things, right? And if I look back on my life, I see how my character defects got me into a fight with that guy. He had said something about college kids in his town. I had said, you're a ridiculous town. He was going to work for me one day. And he hit me at the blackjack. Now, I couldn't see my part. And when I reported the story to her, right, I said he jumped from out of nowhere. I didn't tell her my part, right? It wasn't until much later. But the thing is, that was the thing, that my character defects were active then. And a good sponsor is going to connect the dots, is going to say, hey, Joseph, over here, pride was at work, right? Short-sightedness, short-term gain, right? Poor impulse control. That's something that alcoholics suffer with. There's actually, scientific work that's been done. Alcoholics in general, okay, right, suffer from poor impulse control. And that is true today. It has nothing to do with our drinking. It has to do with sobriety. Poor impulse control. We make those impulse buys, right? We're up at 3 o'clock in the morning, right? Because our brain is haunting us. And we find, something that's going to take the stains out of our t-shirts like nothing else. Or we're on the phone already, right? The reason why they play those commercials at 3 o'clock in the morning is because the people with character defects are awake to watch them, right? And they have a poor impulse control. I need this stuff in my life. Poor impulse control. Also, we have a much wider emotional spectrum. Our highs are much higher, or like how much we experience the joy of a wedding or birth or whatever, and our lowers are low. And we also seem to have a natural obsession with right and wrong, like overly developed sense of right and wrong. Right? Like we talk to our friends about politics, and they're just casually mentioning things about the election. We're like, no, if Trump wins, the country is going to go insane. They're like, calm down, right? You don't even live in Israel, Joseph. You don't even live in America, right? Why are you so upset about this, right? But the thing is, we have to deal with those things in our sobriety. At one point, I dealt with them with alcohol to feel better about myself. It calmed me down. It allowed me to get along with people, whatever it was. So now we're left, right? Just like a beach that has, a rocky shore and the tide goes out, those rocks are now apparent to everybody, right? The rocks were always there, but now the tide's gone out. So those are the character defects which we used to cover up with drugs and alcohol or whatever it was, right? We wear our clothes a little bit tighter, right? We're on edge, right? We wake up in a state, nothing's going to work out or this or that. Hopefully in your sobriety, you're not going to have this occur. But, you see this a lot in the rooms, right? People that, are just going to meetings, this and that. I don't care if you go to 90 and 90 or 500 and 500. If you're not working on your character defects, you're going to be, in a bad state, right? Because, things are going to happen and you're not able to deal with it. So that's what we got to work on today. So the real thing that I wanted to say as far as the character defects, okay, and I mentioned what they are, but you can have them in your own life, like things that you have identified no longer serve you, right? Joe from Joe and Charlie says that they must become objectionable to you. That's actually the quote that they use in the big book, right? These things have become objectionable to us. It's on page 70, right? Okay, so if we can answer to our satisfaction, it's on page 76 in the big book. We can look at step 6. We have emphasized willingness, right? That's the thing that's going to come out. That's a principle underlying step 6, willingness. We want to be willing to part with these things, right? As being indispensable. And willingness is indispensable. Indispensable here, in modern day, it means, essential. You can't do without it. At the time, indispensable meant it can't be dispensed. I can't get it from my sponsor, right? I can never give it to a sponsee. If a sponsee comes to me and lacks honesty, open-mindedness, or willingness, I can never give it to them, right? I have to assess them and vet them, give them a couple of tests, see where they're holding, right? And if they can't do those things, I can't help them, right? I'm not interested in being their friend or their confidant or their unpaid life coach, right? If they don't have honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, then I can't help them. All right, so here it is. Willingness is indispensable. Are we now ready to have God remove all these things which we have admitted are objectionable? Okay, so if you're a fan of the big book, go to page 76, underline that word. They have to become objectionable to us. If you think of your own house, right, a lot of us anyway, we just went through Passover cleaning, right? If you're not Jewish or whatever, you have your spring cleaning. Okay, so you have things in your house that have been sitting around for years, right? That you say, I'm going to get rid of that thing. I'm going to finally give that to my cousin in Cleveland. I'm going to have this assessed and see if it's worth anything, right? Now, the thing is, those things are hanging around and you're okay with it. Once they become objectionable, if they start to rot or smell or, cause difficulty, you want to get rid of them immediately. That's the thing with our character defects. If we tolerate them and we say, you know what, it's okay. We play the progress, not perfection card when people point it out to us. Hey, Joseph, you seem to be like really on, hey, it's progress, not perfection, man. Leave me alone. Right. That's not the way it's meant to be used. It's more along the lines, as we grow to like say, you don't have to get to the end today. But the thing is that once those character defects become objectionable to me, now I want to get rid of them. They no longer, they block me from God. The joy of living, I'm not experiencing to its fullest capacity if I have those character defects shielding me, right? You can imagine a magnet, okay? So a magnet is going to attract metal, okay? But if it's covered in cloth or is shielded somehow, it's not going to have the same ability to attract, right? My soul will attract a connection with God, with its creator. But if it has these character defects wrapped around it, it doesn't do a very good job about it, right? If I think that I am, the arbiter of right and wrong and I'm playing God in my life, I don't need God, right? That's why it comes to tell me on page 62, first of all, we had to quit playing God, right? Now that's a very bold statement and it's good that it's there. But really, did I ever think that I was like being God? What that really means there is being a slave to my thoughts, opinions, and attitudes about the way the world should be running, right? And the alcoholic, right? We have opinions about everything. Things we haven't even heard about yet, right? Just go up to an alcoholic, ask him, what do you think about this, right? He's going to give you a long dialogue about this and that, what they should be doing over there in the Knesset or in Congress or in Parliament, right? Nobody's pulling up to their house in a fleet of Suburbans to come consult with that person. What should we be doing in the government, right? But he's got opinions about, everything. But the thing is that, I said to myself, if I'm a slave to my thoughts, opinions, and attitudes, they are shielding me from having an authentic experience in the world. What it means over there, as far as like I had to quit playing God, I had to relinquish my right to give commentary on everything in the world. I don't have opinions on those things. I really don't. You can ask me about stuff. Yeah, I'm not. When COVID was happening, right? Everybody would come up to me. Are you vaxxed? Are you this? Are you that? Now those people just wanted to pick a fight, right? And I saw them coming, right? I'd say, I haven't decided. What do you think? Right? I didn't tell them. I don't want to have a discussion with some random person who's wanting to pick a fight. Just ask him, what he thought or whatever, right? But the thing is, what my point is there that I don't have opinions about those things. I let God run the world, right? There are three kinds of business: my business, your business, God's business. Okay, and I'm only given enough resources to handle one of those: my business. Okay, my job assignment according to God. Page 63, states it as stay close and perform his work well. I have enough resources to do that, but I'm obsessed with the other two. I'm obsessed with God's business. I have to, I got to check on the news and see what the IDF is doing and their movements and this and that, right? Meanwhile, all I'm doing is upticking my anxiety, right? I got to find out what's going on with starvation in Africa, right? That's going to bend me out of shape. Something I have no control over, can't do anything about. I got to buy a copy of People magazine to find out who's divorcing who in Hollywood. And I got opinions about that too. It's all a waste of time for me, right? So my character defect had me focusing on those things so that I wasn't accomplishing the job that I was sent here to do. I had to get those out of my way, and I had to get out of your business, right? Why do I think that I have to come in and say, for a long time I was the actually guy, right? Like somebody would say something and I'd be like, actually, you're wrong for 7 reasons. Here are 4. Right. And then I'd like outline, what their problems are or whatever. Right. But why did I do that? Because I was focused on their business. Now I've come to my senses, and in a particular regard, I've had a spiritual experience. I see things clearer. It's not my job. If somebody asks me, how do you spell a word? Okay, fine. I can tell them. Joseph, what page is this on the big book? I can tell them. Joseph, what's your favorite recipe for fettuccine Alfredo? I can tell them. But I don't go around offering, information to people who didn't ask. It's not my job. It takes me off of page 63, puts me on page 62 of being selfish and self-centered. And that leads me to be restless, irritable, discontented. And that leads me closer to a drink, right? Now, if none of us ever drink again, right? What's the name of the game today? The quality of our experience today. How are we moving towards being page 133, happy, joyous, and free, right? If you're not, something is wrong. It says on page 133, we are absolutely certain that God wants us to be happy, joyous, and free. They're not kidding there. It's not poetic. That means they are certain that God. So if I'm not happy, joyous, and free today, I have to take a look at my program. My character defects might be active. I might be saying, that today's not working out as good as on the way here, by the way, right? There was a problem with the bus and it broke down, whatever. And then, it got fixed and we continued on, right? So my brain naturally wants to say, why is this happening, right? God doesn't know what he's doing. Why did I make the mistake of traveling on but Why am I even in Israel anyway? This always happens. All these things, right? You put your brain on spin cycle, but I have to calm myself down and say that's all a product of character defects, right? So I pick up my phone and I call another alcoholic and I called them for the purposes of asking them how they are doing. That's an outreach call. That treats my character defects, right? If I called up to double down on the problem and say, hey, man, let me tell you about this bus experience that I had, blah, 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 blah. That's just upticking my commitment to these character defects, right? And that's keeping me more shielded from God. As I pull away these barriers, the natural result is I'm more connected with God. Just like the magnet, as we strip away the cloth from a magnet, it naturally magnetizes the iron flakes. And that leads to a quality experience. The reason why I didn't drink today isn't because I don't have, it's not lack of funds. It's not that I don't know where alcohol is. It's not that I don't have access to it. It's because I don't need a drink in my life today, right? My life doesn't demand it. I don't struggle with anxiety. I don't struggle with depression. I'm not in conflict with a lot of people. I'm not waiting for the other shoe to drop because I'm gossiping about friends or I stole from somebody or whatever it is, right? If those are the kind of things you're experiencing, a drink is just a matter of time. Eventually your brain's going to click over and it's going to say, hey, you know what? I need some ease and comfort. This is just too much. I'm too stressed out about this, that, the other thing, right? And then eventually your brain's going to say, I need some ease and comfort. The only way I know to get it is through a drink, a drug, a pill, binge watching Netflix or something like that, right? To level me out. A lot of people go that route, right? I got to get into a relationship, right? That's what a lot of people say. The thing is that where we are now, and Karen, you can kind of coach me on time, I'll go on forever if you let me. But the thing is that, that there's, if you have, let's say, something going on, let's say my case, right? Okay. Loneliness, right? So let's say I think I'm lonely, okay? Right? So my brain tells me, you know what? I need to get into a relationship, right? That seems obvious. That's what I was trained. But my recovery training says, no, maybe I can pare away the loneliness. I can dial down the loneliness. Am I really lonely? No, I'm connected to God. I'm connected to you guys. I have a book study where people, come and I'm connected to them. During the course of the day, I'm reaching out to people. I'm not really that lonely, right? I'm connected to other people, right? So I dial down the loneliness and then I don't have to go and seek out a girlfriend. I really, I need a relationship. I need a relationship. That's never been the case, right? So that's the issue with relationships treating loneliness. Same thing with alcohol treating, restless, irritable, discontented. You can either treat that restless, irritable, discontented experience or shrink it by having a spiritual experience. I see things clearer now, right? I was talking about the 3 stages of how I perceive recovery. The first stage, right? You're basically, moving away from the drinking or drug or bad behavior. Second stage is you're getting comfortable over there, but you have yet to have a spiritual experience. Third stage of having a spiritual experience is I live in a different world that I used to live in when I was drinking. I live in a world where people are conspiring to help me, right? Where things are tend towards working out. That's been my experience. The day is a good day. I suspended my rights to have opinions on whether it's a good day or a bad day, because I truly don't know. Right? Was the first day I got sober a good day or a bad day? Right? It wasn't. It was a day. Just like today, I refuse to say. If you're walking around saying, you know what, this is a good day, this is a good day, right? Monday's a good day, Tuesday's a good day, Wednesday. I guarantee within the course of a week, you're going to use the word bad day, and then you're going to be living in an experience where I'm having a bad day, right? And that's I don't want to be there, so I just suspend it. And I say, you know what, today is just a day, right? Just like any other day. I stay on page 63, right? And it treats my character defects. I stay away from being restless, irritable, discontented. I aspire to serve my employer by staying close to him, perform his work well, right? And that keeps me from going back onto page 62 of being selfish and self-centered. And that's really what the game is about today. You can easily, go up to somebody, talk to them for 5 minutes. Oh, here, I'll tell you something, as like a perfect example. So this last day of the holiday, right, of Passover, somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, Joseph, we have a need. Could you help us out and take our dog for a day?" Right? We're having guests that don't get along with dogs. So could you take our dog? Right? So I happen to very much love this dog. I've had it before, whatever. I said, "Sure, no problem. I love it." Right? They bring it down. I got the dog. I related the story to a friend. I said, I'm dog sitting. Right? First thing he said to me, "Well, make sure they pay you." Right? He didn't see it as a blessing. He saw it as a hassle. Right? So he was reacting to that worldview of it being a hassle. I looked at it as a blessing. Yes, I want to take care of this dog. It was a joy. I got to come home to a little tiny dog jumping up and down that was glad to see me or whatever it is. For a single guy, that's a joy, right? But my friend existed in a different world where it's on the material plane, right? That's something that's talked about in the big book, right? We move from the material plane of transactions to a spiritual plane of being taken care of by God. God decided that, Joseph needs a dog in his life for a day, right? Which is the equivalent of like being a grandparent, right? Where you could have the kids, but you don't have to worry about their braces and the cost of their education or whatever, right? So I had the dog, I take care of it, and I give it back. But my friend had a completely different viewpoint on it. And if you're having that narrow viewpoint, right, of like, I'm not getting paid enough at this job, as opposed to it's a blessing to be employed today, right? It's not a lack of information, right? I sometimes play these games with my sponsee, that they say, "Oh, job's really, really, tough and this and that." So I could send them to the unemployment office, right? And go talk to some people who are unemployed, right? Is that what you want to be? Well, no, I don't want to go there, right? One of my first sponsor, I was complaining. I was in rehab, right? For the first 9 months of my sobriety, I was in rehab. And I was complaining about not getting okayed for a pass. So he said, "Okay, Joseph, you know what? I'm going to take you to go meet some people that I know that don't have any problems. Okay, we're going to go meet, these people that, have every right to be happy or whatever." So I said, "Okay, fine." Right. So he picks me up. I figured we were going to a country club. He took me to a cemetery, right? He takes me to a cemetery. He's like, "These people don't have any problems." He's like, "Is this the option you want to exercise, Joseph?" Right. I was like, "No." Right. The typical newcomer, "No." Right. So, and then he takes me over to Ralph's supermarket, and I picked up peanut butter and jelly and sandwiches and handed them out to homeless people. Right. This is what he did for me. And he showed me, what? I was really being, ungrateful, not lacking clarity, the whole thing. Right. It beat it into me a little bit more of like, not just that things could be worse. We're always aware of that. But you know what? To expand my consciousness that I live on a planet where I'm actually enjoying a ton of blessings. I didn't drink today, right? That means there's an extra $50 to $100 in my bank account that wouldn't be there if I was drinking. Now, do I want to take and reallocate that $50 to $100 to, pleasing some of my friends, maybe enjoying myself, maybe, buying something that I need or whatever it is, right? I've got a whole lot of extra time on my hands because I'm not getting into arguments all the time, right? Maybe I can read a book that I've been meaning to. Maybe I can, enjoy something on Netflix or whatever, not obsessively, but, I can go and, make plans with friends of mine. Anybody who's articulating about their particular life, that they're crazy busy or that they're, what's the word? Whatever, that they're really busy, overwhelmed.
Swamped, no?
Swamped, yeah, swamped, right? Yeah, swamped is just as good. I was thinking overwhelmed, but if you're swamped, then who's your employer, right? I had to say this to my sponsee. He said, "I'm swamped. I'm overwhelmed." I'm like, "It sounds like you have a tyrant for an employer." He's like, No, Joseph. We talked about it. Page 63. God's my employer. I said, "No, he's not." I said, "God's a perfect entity, right? The amount of work that you're piling on is from you." And then we eventually got to it. He was like, "Yeah, I'm taking on more work at the office because I really want to ask for a raise soon and this and that because you don't trust God that he's going to take care of the raise. So you got to make moves," right? He goes backwards in his steps. He's back in step one. He's managing his life again badly. He's reporting to me he's overwhelmed. He doesn't have a lot of time to do things that are healthy for him, right? No, I was presenting a clear picture to him. I wasn't coming into him and saying, "You're bad or anything. I was just like, you're the source of your trouble. I was quoting the big book. We believe that so our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making, right? You've all read that. If you've read the big book or taken anybody through the work or whatever it is, it's right there for anybody to read. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. They arise out of ourselves. And the alcoholic is this is on page 62, as an extreme example of self-will run riot. When it says extreme, that means that there's other examples. All of humanity is an example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. And I tell people, you should underline that sentence. An extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. That means that person that's in denial might be me. Denial isn't just a river in Egypt. That means I have to allocate a God squad for myself, right? I can't kid myself about this. Maybe I'm not moving through the work. Maybe I am, in possession of a lot of character defects that I don't know about, right? Until somebody wakes up to the fact that they're in need of this information, right? Then they have no use for it, right? Until somebody points out, that this is of value to you, then you're not going to see it that way. You're going to think it's for somebody else. How many people have sat in a class or a meeting, or maybe getting a lecture from a religious person, right? And they're thinking to themselves, oh, Ruvain should really hear this, right? My friend should really hear this talk, right? Not me, right? Because I'm doing everything correctly, right? This other person should think about it, right? Because that's how my brain works. It shields myself from real growth. And I'm not drinking today, right? So I say to myself, the cops aren't looking for me. I'm not burning relationships. I'm okay. But am I really growing? Am I really shedding my character defects? Am I really serving God to the best of my ability? Because those blessings don't come unless I'm making a space for them, right? If I'm not, making myself available for, the person who asked me to take the dog, I could have easily said, yeah, I'm too busy. Or what do you think I am? You're a doormat, right? A lot of people say that in recovery. Oh, I'm codependent. How do I stop from being a doormat? Right? Just stop already. Just stay on page 63. The rest takes care of itself, right? Stay close to him, perform his work well. This is by the way, this is the talk that I gave last time with Karen that a lot of people come back to me on, that I'm page 63 guy, right? I should get a t-shirt or something. But the thing is that if I stay on page 63, my character defects become revealed to me because they're blockages. If I'm having trouble being of service to God, there's a reason for that. My pride's interaction. I think I'm too good to be doing that, right? I don't have enough time or resources to be doing that because I'm allocating it on other things, right? I'm getting into conflict at work, right? And think about it. If your character defect, let's say you have a character defect, you like to get into arguments with people. Okay, a lot of people, I know people. Seeing names here, there's a few people who have revealed this to me. They enjoy the geschmack, the deliciousness of a good fight, right? Now, okay, fine. So what happens? They go into their office, somebody says something, and they have to correct them, and this and that, and they're going to die on that hill that they're right and the other person is wrong, right? So they spent a half hour in that argument, right? And then if they're into recovery, they go to their sponsor, and the sponsor points out, really, that was pride out, Now they have to go back and apologize. That's another 20 minutes, right? So they spent a whole hour of their day in something that was just totally useless based on their character defects. They could have recalibrated that hour to something useful and that really would have benefited them, right? If anybody who has kids, right, wouldn't you want to reallocate that hour to spending with your children, right? There's a lack of clarity there that we don't see clearly, that there's going to be a day that each of us are going to grow cold and be put in the ground. Right? Sorry to spoiler alert, right? Now, if you have that clarity that that's coming, I'm not here to be maudlin. It could be in 50 years from now. But if we're not clear that there's only a finite amount of time on this planet, we will get into arguments with people for no reason, right? We will, offer our opinions when they weren't asked for. We will, get into, research projects. You ever go down the rabbit hole on your phone, right? You're trying to look up what year the Declaration of Independence was written in. And the next thing you know, you're looking at Britney Spears videos, right? Because it goes through somehow that the Declaration of Independence and the George Washington led to another thing and this and that, right? And everybody winds up on Britney Spears videos or whatever it is, right? But that's the thing, is that that's letting your character defects run things. And I said this last night, and I think it's a valid metaphor. If you've got a horse and a rider, right? It's a great relationship as long as the rider's in charge. The rider takes the horse where it needs to go, right? They're both happy. But if the horse is in charge, right, that's a nightmare story. The horse and the rider's like all over the place, right? That's a scary experience. That's what it's like when our character defects are running things. We're pulled this way and that way, right? We want to play the big shot, or we go after the money, right? Or we get into our kids' business because they don't look as nice as the kids next door, right? We're not trusting in God. We're running out character defects run things, right? We go in. This happens a lot in Brooklyn, by the way. Rabbi Torsky had revealed that there's a whole huge problem with gambling addiction in Brooklyn with the Orthodox community. Why? Because I'm having my bar mitzvah, but Cohen had his bar mitzvah last week, and there was like fake shrimp cocktail there and an ice sculpture, and they had Shweki singing and whatever. So now I got to come up with like $40,000 for my kid's bar mitzvah, and I only got 10 in the bank. My brain clicks over and says, "Oh, I'll just take it down to Atlantic City, right? And I'll parlay into whatever, right?" The thing was, the gambling addiction was because my social pressures and my character defects were at work, that seemed like a good option. But if I could get rid of those character defects and not keep up with the Joneses and not feel a sense of low self-worth or low self-esteem or whatever it is, then I don't have to make moves based on that, right? To push other people down, to win my argument, to correct people in public, right? And it doesn't matter, I happen to be a rabbi, right? So there's a lot of Jewish laws about like you shouldn't do things in public or whatever. And a lot of people go ahead and violate them, right? And really, we're all aware of it. Shouldn't embarrass somebody in public, right? And people do it all the time, right? They go, because I'm correcting him. He didn't know how to spell a word, so I decided to correct him. Yeah, but you shouldn't have done it in front of his family at the Shabbos table, right? That was a little bit marginalizing, whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the consequences are. It doesn't matter what the cost is. If our character defects are running things, they're going to make us act out. Right. So now what I'm presenting to you, or what we could talk about now, is these steps 6 and 7. Step 6 says I have to become willing to get rid of them. Right. I became aware of what they are in steps 4 and 5. Now I say to myself, am I willing to part with these? The big ones: pride, lust, anger, greed, gluttony, and be sloth. Am I willing to part with pride? Right. So now let's get into step 7. Humbly ask them to remove these shortcomings. That's going to be an active prayer to God, but it's also going to have attached to it action steps. If I'm struggling with pride, I have to spend a little bit of time keeping my mouth shut, right? Not going for the spotlight, praising others. One of my sponsees was struggling with this very thing, and it was getting him into a lot of trouble with his wife or whatever. So I said, you know what? You got to start calling people every day, 3 calls, and praise them for something that you're aware that they're doing. I don't care if it's true, right? Call them up and say, hey, you know what? You really do have a good singing voice, okay? Why? Because they're going to get it out of their system, right? That they need to be the focus of the spotlight all the time. And then they'll go to a middle ground. The reason is because if those character defects are there and are there for years, year after year after year, it's not a question of being aware of them. I have to, come to the fact that it's shielding me from God. The great blessings that God has in store for me that we're all aware of. If you're in this program and you see the promises, right? Page 83, page 84, not regret the past, we're to shut the door on it, right? We'll suddenly realize God's doing for us what we couldn't do for ourselves. The reason why those aren't coming true are character defects. If I start to shed them, the natural result will be that I'll become closer to God. Okay, I'll say this last thing. Here's a metaphor that you can look at as far as character defects go. Become aware of them. Step 6, you're going to become willing. Step 7, you're going to actively try and get rid of them. So what does it look like? We're restoring ourselves to our pristine state that we were when we were little children. A baby has only 2 natural fears: loud noises and being hungry. Okay, that's why they cry. Society and our parents and everybody else put all these character defects on us to deal with life. We started telling lies when it got us out of trouble. We started, thinking that we had to get A's on the tests in order to get praise and whatever. We had to, work out so that we look good in the mirror, so that we get the girl or the guy or whatever it is, right? All these character defects. Nobody ever told us we're perfect and whole right now. This is new information that I had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous to discover. Perfect and whole right now. And the thing is that if we're restoring ourselves to our natural state of how we're supposed to be, but these things are on top of us, it's the same example as what I'm about to present. Michelangelo, when he was asked, there's a statue, King David, right? You've all seen it. It's 9 feet tall, whatever. I think it's in the Louvre, It's an amazing statue, right? It looks like a human being. So people came up to him and asked, how did you carve this statue so lifelike, like it looked exactly like a human being. And he thought for a second, he said, you know what? I took a block of marble and I carved away everything that is not David. So here's the thing. Here's your challenge, right? It was never about the drinking. It was never about the food. It was never about whatever. You have to carve away all the things that are not the true you, and you naturally will come to connect with God, and you'll wind up landing on page 133, being happy, joyous, and free. And I wish you well. Now, I think, Karen, if you want to go to question and answer.
Yeah, I have a little bit of background noise here, but maybe I think we had a question here in the chat. Hold on a sec. And if anyone wants to unmute themselves to ask a question, just raise your hand and we'll unmute. Okay, one sec. Okay, here's a question. It was asked directly, so I'll keep it anonymous. Is it better to ask God to remove what he thinks is defective, or remove
Right.
I identify as defective?
Okay, that's a good question. So let's try and keep it simple and really practical. Whatever is blocking me from God on a practical sense, if things aren't manifesting for me, there's probably something blocking that, right? Yes, it's true that God is probably more aware of what my actual character defects are. And so I have to be open to hearing from another person, maybe a sponsor, maybe somebody from my God squad, to say, like, you know what, Ursula, Karen, whatever, Chris, I'm really in this work. Could you, point out to me, a character defect that I need to work on? I'm not walking around all day, like trying to just, please, I'm nothing. I need work to do. But like, hey, I don't know everything. Can you tell me something that I struggle with? During this last month of before Rosh Hashanah, there's a month called Elul, right? And I took this very seriously to work on myself before the Jewish New Year. So part with in line with this AA program, I went to 3 different people that I'm close with and asked them to give them an assessment of like things I could work on, things that I was doing well in, whatever it is. And I was told by somebody that I learned with at yeshiva that I have this predilection to go and to try and educate the guys in the yeshiva without them asking, because I think I'm doing God's work, because they're struggling with something, or they're about to do something that's not in line with what it says in our Jewish law books or whatever. And I go and I tell them stuff. And he was like, you know what, your motive is good, but you're not landing on fertile ground because they didn't ask you, A, and B, it's not serving you well, Joseph. Now, I want to tell you something interesting about this particular thing. He pointed out something, right, that I was struggling with, that I was inappropriately getting into somebody's business and trying to help them. So it took me back to when I was 6 years old. I was skipped a grade, right? Because I was so great in math and English at the time. I skipped a grade, right? Now I tell the story, right? I think to myself, because I was such a little genius that they skipped me a grade. But that's not actually the real story. The real story, my sister knows, and we've talked about this. I was inappropriately tutoring the other students. I was going around and I was like getting into their business, and I was like 6, 3, 4, it's 13. Hello, let's move on. Let's get this rolling, first grade teacher. Right? That's what I was doing. I was inappropriately tutoring the other students. The exact same behavior that was manifesting 50 years later in my life, around a yeshiva in Israel. What the point that I'm making is that now I'm aware of it. I'm taking steps to like dial down on it, whatever it is. But the thing is that like that ultimately was blocking me from God back when I was a little boy, and also when I'm a mature man. And I wasn't even aware of it, right, until somebody came and pointed it out. So I'm answering the question about like, should we let God point them out? Both, right? The ones that you're aware of, deal with. And then just so that to be sure, get somebody else involved and say, hey, I'm really struggling with this, not struggling, but I really want to do this work well. Can you tell me some things that I might not be aware of? And then they could say things, that you don't agree with, and that's fine. And maybe, then you can bring it to somebody else and you can say, what, somebody said this about me. Do you really think that's true? And they could say, no, you're not like that at all. But we're trying to drill down to the truth, right? Okay. So I think I've answered that question. I hope so anyway. And I think Brindy is putting questions in the chat.
Yeah, she sure did. She said, how do we stop our unhealthy thoughts besides asking God to change them? If our thoughts are a problem, Brandy, I know I say this to you all the time and every day. And I'm going to let Joseph answer this, but I am going to stick in my 2 cents here is there's a couple of parts to that. Step 6 and 7 is we pray to God to remove our character defects and immediately turn our thoughts to someone we can help, and then we go help them. We can't forget the second part. If we're only focused on our thoughts, then we're going to have a lot of selfishness on our step 10 at night, right? Because it's all about me. We have to pray and focus on the other person. But she wanted to hear what you have to say, Joseph. So sure. I just wanted to put in the plug for
learning to it's a group journey. Okay, so first of all, I don't believe thoughts come from elsewhere, right? I believe that just like we're powerless over liquor, we are powerless over that first thought. This is life. Come to deal with it. It's going to come from out of nowhere, right? It could be a thought that, hey, I'd like to take that watch that's on my friend's dresser, right? I don't have to act on it, right? But it does come. The thought could pop in and say, you know what? My bar mitzvah is not going to be as good as the people next door, right? And then I can be aware of it, address it, this and that, whatever. But the first thought, I don't believe we have any control over. The second part is how we address that, right? What we do about it. I have to have a program in place because those thoughts are going to come, right? They're going to come from outside. And, I can pray so that God, removes but they're going to come from out of nowhere. The thing is, I have to recognize that and have a plan in place to deal with them as they come. Like when you go on a trip and you have to go through passport control, they check your paperwork to make sure you're valid. Have a system in place that you check your thoughts to make sure they're valid. Is this really true? Where am I getting that information? We sell ourselves on stuff all the time. And when I start asking people, where'd you get that information? They don't know. They'll say, I got it from me, right? And I'll go to rehabs, and I'll say like, okay, fine. Where are you getting that information about what you need to do? Where'd you get that plan from? Well, I came up with it, right? Well, are you aware that same brain got you into rehab? And yet you're going back and consulting with that brain, right? You need to do some outsourcing here. So the thing is that, we have to be aware that our thoughts aren't always going to make sense. So we have to check it out. Is this valid paperwork? This is what I advise my sponsees and stuff as far as taking action. The thought comes in, right? And then our available actions, right, are as an offshoot of that, and make a list of the principles: honesty, hope, faith, courage, integrity, willingness, humility, love, discipline, perseverance, awareness, service. And if what you're about to do is going to violate any of those principles, do not do it, right? And if you say to yourself, I'm going to do it anyway, right, then yourself will run riot, right? Then you get welcome to page, 61, right? That's the page that you're going to live on. You're going to have all the consequences that come along with it. But if you say to yourself, okay, I'm going to clamp down, I'm still going to have the thought, right, that I need to get into a relationship, or that I need more money, or whatever it is, or, that not enough, or this and that. But then you can say, the action step that comes of it, right? You can start limiting, what's done about it. And that keeps us on. And again, I boil it down to, I try and keep it simple, stupid, right? Page 63, right? Stay close to him, perform his work well. Whatever thoughts are coming through my head, that I have to chime in on this group chat. Do I really, right? Who assigned me that job? Somebody, was asking me about, they told me the story, right? That they went to a dog park near their house, okay? An alcoholic, right? Went to a dog park near their house, and somebody was, in her view, abusing their dog, right? Was like, hitting their dog. So she had to get involved and said, that's not okay, and this and that, and da-da-da. This person called her an a-hole, and now she's all bent out of shape, and she's reporting to me that this is the source of her problem. The source of her problem is that guy. I said, oh, well, okay, let's get some facts straight. How long have you worked for the Parks Department? She said, I don't. I said, oh, so it's a volunteer position, right? Do they give you a uniform? She's like, no, I don't. I don't have any authority there. Then why were you getting into that guy's business, right? God didn't come down and say you need to get into this guy's business. Your brain came up with the storyline that you need to do something about this, right? And there it is, you did. The reaction was that this guy, called you out on it, right? And you feel bad about it. And he's going off with his dog, right? And you're here suffering. That's the way we run our life. It's the actor story over and over again. But when I asked her, like who put you in that position, she ultimately, I had to pull it out of her, like, pulling her teeth. She had to say, I put myself there. Yeah, that's the story. So we have to check our thoughts against, and see, are they being rational? Is this really the storyline? Does this make sense? Right? Does it hang together? Right? So I think, we can't, your question presupposes that we're able to prevent them from coming in. I don't believe that that's true. We're powerless over them. Right? But we can deal with them once they come in. Check the paperwork.
Yeah, and sometimes I've heard a lot in 6 and 7. Joseph, maybe you could share with me where exactly that shows up in the big book of like taking contrary action, not trusting our alcoholic mind and doing the opposite thing. So sometimes the best way to stop unhealthy thoughts is actually not thinking. It could be to go run a mile. It could be to go do Pilates class. We addicts are undisciplined. That's one quote. We let God discipline us. So if I know that my natural reaction is to have some cockamamie resentment or start some monologue about rah, 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 the left wing and the right wing and the Bibi Netanyahu and whatever, that's in my country. And it's because of all the infighting and all these, little plans and designs that are not my privilege to be dealing with. Sometimes the answer for my unhealthy thoughts is Pilates, call my sponsee, whatever. And Joseph, you can share what that's in the big book, but I know step 6 and 7 talks a lot about that, praying.
Yeah. So contrary action is all over the big book. And well, first of all, with the thought thing, have in your pocket, right? Something that happened with my sponsee was saying, like, oh, if things had been different, right? I would have married my college sweetheart and I'd be over here, whatever. So I asked him to write a story about where he got drunk one night and drove drunk and ran over a 10-year-old girl and he was spending 50 years in jail the rest of his life. Write a story about that. Make that real. Because just like he's saying this was a possibility, then this was also a possibility. And the fact of the matter is, he should be grateful he's not in jail, right? Like my famous thing that, my director of the rehab I came through said, that Joseph, you better thank God that life ain't fair, because if it was, you'd be dead or in jail, right? And that's a true story. She said, if life were really fair, you'd be made to feel how bad you've made other people feel the whole course of your life, right? That's a true story, right? Okay, so anyway, if a thought comes in, that says like, oh, things could have been different or whatever it is, right? You can recognize it as just being, a waste of time or whatever, or go the opposite. Think of a really bad story that hasn't happened, right? That you could have, gotten drunk, fell asleep, cigarette burned down a house, whatever, and you could be paralyzed on half your body. Well, snap your fingers. That didn't happen, right? It's a miracle, right? You have full use of your arms and legs, right? You can feel blessed rather than feeling like you lost out, okay? But as far as like contrary action, I'm just going to cover one little thing, right? So everybody's pretty much familiar with this, right? How the big book wants to deal with resentment, right? Page 66, the bottom of it. This was our course. We realized that the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick, right? So here's how I want to view things, right? I've come into Alcoholics Anonymous. And I think they're the problem, right? They're the problem, right? I have resentments against everybody, right? I'm being awakened to the fact that I was really the problem. So now this is cluing me in, and it says this was our course. We realized the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. So now I'm starting to have a more favorable view of these people. That I'm recasting it. They're not a threat to me. They're just sick, like a guy in a wheelchair, okay? If, you're in the supermarket, right? You're doing your business, and all of a sudden somebody steps on your foot hard, right? You're mad. You turn around, and the guy is in a wheelchair, right? All of a sudden, you're not as mad at that person because he's disabled. Okay, great. Look at the people who are wronging you as being disabled. The people who are coming at you, trying to cause you difficulty or whatever it is, family members, right? That say things that, you go for your, family dinners or whatever it is. Okay. You go for your family dinners or whatever it is. And, the first thing out of your mom's mouth is, when are you going to give me grandchildren? Right? Or, like you go and you're looking forward to a good time. You open the door and they say, wow, you put on weight. Right? Okay, fine. So those people, they're spiritually sick. If they weren't spiritually sick, they wouldn't have said those things. Great. So now I've leveled the playing field. Though we did not like their symptoms are they speak without thinking. And the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too, right? So now we've leveled the playing field. They're sick, I'm sick, everybody's sick, great, kumbaya, right? They're no better, no worse than I am. Now, we ask God's help to show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience. So this is where Karen was asking about contrary action, right? I don't want to do this. I'm going to ask for tolerance, pity, and patience. I want to kill the guy. That's what I want to do, right? This is contrary action. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. It's contrary action, right? It's giving me actions to reach out to God to show this guy tolerance. Tolerance is sitting on my hands, letting God do his work. Pity is seeing that because of these people's, that they're not able to hold their tongue or that they speak without thinking, they're having difficulties in their lives, maybe in their marriage, maybe they're on their second divorce, maybe they, their kids don't like them because they can't, hold their tongue or whatever it is. Show them a little bit of pity, right? It's difficult to be that way. Patience, right? That you're going to let God do his work and correct that if he chooses. That we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, fine, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him, right? So this is clear contrary action. I do not want to be helpful to this guy, right? But the reason why the big book put this in here is because back on page 63, I said that God was going to be my employer. And I've already forgotten 2 pages later that I have a job assignment to be helpful to people, right? So I have to come along over here and how can I be helpful to this guy? And it's not, how can I be helpful to him, right? To educate him that what he said was stupid or that's not being helpful. How can it be helpful to him? Was ignore what he said, just bat it to the side and tell him, oh, wow, you look great, this and that, right? Be helpful in some particular capacity. God saved me from being angry, right? This is also contrary action because left to my own devices, I want to double down on the anger, right? I want to polish that resentment, right? I got to get my weapons together. That's how I used to live. And thy will be done. That is also contrary action because normally I'm not in the mood. I'm not of the mind to let God's will be done. I want my will to be done. These people have to pay for those resentments, right? That's not the thing. And I'll end with this part, and then I'll get to her question. The model of thought to action, right? So we have a thought, right? In our alcoholic state, when we're not in a good state, we have a thought generates an emotion, then we act on it, right? I have a thought, I'm not married, generates an emotion, I'm lonely, an action that I got to go on Tinder or surf for a girlfriend or ask all my friends, please help me or whatever it is, or I got to drink over it, right? So the thought, emotion, action. Alcoholics Anonymous takes the other route. It is going to govern our actions. It gives us actions, right? When a person offended, we think to ourselves, this is a sick man. How can I be helpful to him, right? It gives me action, right? That I have to reach out to God, this and that. That's going to generate an emotion. I feel like I'm being taken care of. I feel like I have clarity in my life. I feel that I've given it over to God, which is going to eventually change my thinking, right? That's the route that we take today. If you're of the mind that you're having thoughts all day, right, and it's coming in and it generates your emotion, you're driving all over the place through your life, causing trouble everywhere, right? Or you're acting in ways that to be bad for you, right? You're eating too much. You're engaging in behaviors that aren't, you're overspending, right? People they do retail therapy. They don't have, particularly large income and they need an extra pair of shoes. They need a new dress. They need a new suit or whatever it is. So those are the things is that contrary action comes down to changing our thinking by doing the actions first, right? That are given to us by our sponsor or, a trusted fellow, right? It'll generate emotion, which will then alter our thinking. Karen, you had a question?
Just kidding. It's on it's a personal question, and I'm not sure if it's a step 6 and 7 thing, but I have a gut feeling it might be.
Okay.
I had the situation with a neighbor. She has a daughter in my daughter's class. Anyway, so one day she calls me and she says yeah, your daughter and my daughter, it's not a good match. He's telling her not to listen to her mother, and I don't know if I thought it was recovered or just, trying to save face. I was like, oh, yeah, I agree with you, and I was like, okay. The old me would have been kind of, resentful and upset and insecure. And I thought, what, just, let's get out of this and pray on it as soon as possible. I was like, oh, yeah, probably, it's mutual. I didn't want to be, what do they call it? servile scraping, all that. But I was like, okay, I got off the phone, fine. That was all good. And then I found myself kind of, I guess in big book language, we just call it a resentment, right? Every time I saw her, I was like, grr, she said, my kid isn't a good kid. Grr, she's playing with other kids in the building. And I've been here 3 years longer. And like, she's friends with all the other kids. And now my kid is like the one that isn't getting played with. Anyway, I'm kind of keeping this resentment. I may have prayed on it. I may have, let it go, was okay. So then at one point, and this was probably being undisciplined, I let her have it. I thought, okay, maybe that was wrong. Maybe I'm being dishonest and people pleasing. Perhaps I need to speak my truth. And I was like, I'm really upset. I know your kid is just a little kid, but she exclaimed in front of the building that, she's not allowed to play with my daughter. And I said, I used to have nice relationships with other neighbors and my kid played with other neighbors, but it's like now you hog them all. And okay, so clearly, I took the reins and tried to run the show as opposed to let God running the show. But where would I stick 6 and 7 years? Anyway, and she's like, can I tell you my side? I was like, no, I really don't want to hear your side. You told me your side. And I said, I'm just really upset. My kids used to play with other neighbors and now they don't. And now you like, your little kid, like kind of blacklisted my kid. And it's just, I just want you to know this is really unpleasant for me. She's like, well, I feel really bad. And I was like, well, yeah, you should. And she's like, do you want to hear my side? I said, no, I don't. I've just been holding this for a while, in my stomach for a while. I've been carrying it for a long time, and I'm just upset about what you did. And now it's like when I walk by her, she doesn't even say hi to me. So I'm like, oh gosh, I need to stick my program on this. What's that?
Yeah, I wouldn't think she would after you treated her like that. You don't want to hear her side of it, right? You just want your way of thinking, right? You're playing God. You know best.
I did hear her side the first time.
Yep. But then she made an overture. Karen, I mean, like, you want to be right or recover, like, whatever. She said, do you want to hear my side of the story?
I'm listening.
Yeah. Do you want to hear my side of the story? I do not, right? I is real big there. I do not, right? God was presenting, I want to send Karen some information. I got, her channel's clogged. I can't communicate with her. Okay, why don't we send this other person to give her some information, right? So the person shows up. I don't want to hear it. I'm not interested, right? You're not interested in a viewpoint that's in conflict or makes you feel bad about your own. In your situation over there, what was the real problem that set the ball rolling? Your kid was somebody that was identified as undesirable. I don't know anything about your kid. I don't really care. It doesn't matter. I don't know the dynamic. That's the real problem. Why is my kid being identified as undesirable? Drill down on that. That was distasteful to you, right? Because you think you would have been a failure or something like that. So instead you went the other action. They're the problem. She's the problem. She's a witch, right? And then you gotta circle your girls, right? And tell them that she's a witch also, right? And you gotta marshal forces and all this. All the time, but the real problem lay dormant for whatever reason, your daughter might need your help. There may be a reason why she's being identified as undesirable. Well, maybe it just might be a misunderstanding. I don't know. Yes, maybe the other party shouldn't have gone public with it and this and that. That's where you land on this page. They're sick people. She shouldn't have done it. Process that resentment. You're sick. I'm sick. They're sick, right? Their kid is not going to be better off for that. The Mean Girls was not a happy story. I don't know if you saw the movie Mean Girls, right? But anyway, the girl who was the ringleader girl, who sounds like this person, she got hit by a bus at the end, right? Or whatever. Yeah, whatever. But justice was served, whatever. That was the whole thing. She didn't die. She just wound up in a body cast. But the thing is, I'm just saying that, like, this girl who's going out in public, if her mom is training her to be like that, there's a payday that's going to come for that. You don't have to read.
It's not the spiritual sickness, right?
Right, exactly. But what I'm saying is, God will take care of that. That's coming somewhere. You don't have to sit around but just shift your focus and your attention to the beginning part of it. Of why was my kid, being labeled as undesirable or whatever it is, and maybe there's a reason for that. Maybe there's not. Right, but
no, it was justified. It was justified, and I took care of that. But the people came on the.
Okay, so right, okay,
it hurt. It hurt.
Right, but okay, I'm sure it did. But But you have to drill down on you. Why did it hurt, Karen? What was hurtful about it?
Yeah, that my kid seemed dysfunctional. That my family's dysfunctional.
If your kid is
before, I'm a bad mother. Whatever.
Right. But Who's saying you're a bad mother? God's not, you are. Show me some reference where God said you were a bad mother. You articulated that statement. You're holding on to a character defect of judging yourself harshly. And it's causing you suffering. Release yourself from that. That's what I was saying before, that I've gone away with the labels. I don't say it's a good day or a bad day or whatever. I don't use words like good mother, bad mother, whatever. Just a mom doing her best in a bad situation. And I know your personal situation. I'm not going to disclose it now or whatever. But I'm just saying, you got a hard time doing what you're doing, this and that. Just go and say to yourself, you're doing your best. But you need some clarity on what the real problem is, and not hang it on somebody else, right? Because then this has been, you're kind of your dynamic a little bit, that you hang it on some villain somewhere, right? And me versus them,
right?
Yeah,
right. It's much better to make her a problem than to
exactly. But it's
real issues with my kids, right? So how do I take my program to that? What's the action I do with that?
You have to start seeing her as being exactly what I read about. I'll read it again. We go to the resentment thing, that you have a resentment against this person. You see her as a sick person. She's just like you. Her blood is just as red as yours, right? She struggles. She is a mom that's training her kid to be a jerk. That's not going to help her kid in marriage. That's not going to help her kid in whatever. She deserves your pity, Karen. She's the one that's not being a good mom, because she's having her kid do a lot of things that are really inappropriate. Now, you don't got to get in and tell everybody about
right, shaming, bullying, blah blah. But I don't have
it's not a good look, right? It's not a good look, right? So though we did not like the symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they like ourselves sick too. She's sick, you're sick, I'm sick. Great. We ask God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience, right? That's what you want to show her. Tolerance, right? She has a different point of view. You liked your daughter. She thought your daughter was undesirable, whatever it is, right? That's tolerant. She can have her opinion. You can have yours. You don't have to change her opinion, whatever it is. Pity, that maybe she's suffering as well. Patience, let God do his business. It may be revealed in a few years, where this behavior goes. That you would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said to ourselves, this is a sick woman, right? How can I be helpful to her? How can you be helpful to her? God save me from being angry, and thy will be done. And I'll just put this, right? Just because we're talking about it, you did ask. She offered to say your point of view. You could call her up and you could say, hey, you know what? I've been thinking about it, right? Let's have dialogue in it. What is your point of view? I'd be interested in hearing. I'm open to
You would do that now, even though I feel it's
why not? Yes, yeah. It'll open the channel of you being more broad-minded. All she knows from you,
hey, that didn't come off.
I told you what to say. Call her up and say, you know what, you've been doing some work on yourself and whatever. And she had a point of view, you'd be interested in hearing it. It might help me. Let's say her name is Sarah. Hi, Sarah. It might help me as a mom if I hear your point of view. It might help me as an individual to hear your point of view. I'm open to all sides, whatever. I want to be, a good Eved Hashem, and whatever. Maybe you got something to say to me. I'm sorry if I clamped you off. I don't necessarily, but Sarah, just say to her, Sarah, I don't necessarily have to agree with you, but I would like to hear what you have to say. And then you're going to have to struggle, Karen, not to interrupt her while she gives her 3-4 minutes of, you don't have to jump in and say, no, right? Just let her do her thing, in my opinion. I think it'll put you.
I have to make sure I'm really ready to have that conversation. Have it.
Well, again, it comes down to, have your character defects become objectionable? Are you tired of being selfish and self-centered and seeing your way is right and their way is wrong? Has that become objectionable to you, or you got another couple of weeks with that? All right. I think Sarah. I didn't mean you, Sarah, when I was saying the word Sarah. But can she finish a question, and then I don't know how we're doing on time, but
Totally fine.
Can Sarah speak?
Can you hear me?
Oh yeah, I can hear you, Sarah. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Sarah?
Okay. So first of all, just thank you. Everything has just been such wonderful to listen to. And my question is, it kind of goes back to what you were talking about with the dog park. And so my question is, when is it appropriate to go in and help someone? I'm definitely someone who gets involved and likes to help and definitely oversteps my boundaries. But I feel like there are times where it is
Wait, stop, Sarah, stop. You really want help here? Do you really want help here? You just said, I feel like I'm somebody that oversteps boundaries, but right now you're going to justify your overstepping the boundaries. Your character defect hasn't become objectionable to you. It's not going to change. You asked a valid question. How do you know, right? I'm page 63. I'm really trying to help you here, by the way. I'm just, let's talk, technicals. Page 63, stay close to him, perform his work well. Ask yourself, did the person ask you for help? Yes or no? Sarah?
Right. If it's no.
Then don't.
But if there's an injustice being done.
Sarah, God's doing a better job of running the world than you give him credit for. If you are needed to chime in here, there will be a question that lands at your address.
Mm-hmm.
Trust me on this. Otherwise, you got to go out and that we should be going into bars and helping them, right? They need our help, right? So we as Alcoholics Anonymous, we should go into bars, right? No, we wait for them to come to us and ask for help. Same thing here. I'm telling you, I've been to business school. I'm an ordained rabbi. I've also had 28 years in program, right? I could go and teach everybody everything. I struggle with it also, right? I could weigh in on all these things. And what I've been trying to do with the help of my sponsor and, spiritual advisor or whatever, is to keep my mouth shut. Write these letters down, W-A-I-T, right? Did you do it? W-A-I-T. Why am I talking? If it's for a self-centered purpose, if you brought yourself into the conversation, if you brought yourself into the dynamic, that's page 62 stuff. That's you being selfish and self-centered. Maybe either you don't trust God that he can help this person without you, or you want to look good, or you feel the need to be busy, right? You're using your energy over here when God wants you to be using it over here, right? Or so if you're getting involved, where you shouldn't be, it's using up your time that could have been, others. Especially you already revealed to me that you tend towards codependency, did you not? Sarah?
I don't know. Did I? I don't.
No, you said you get involved with other people's business and this and that, right? You're
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's codependence. That's what the Al-Anon model.
All right.
I'm trying to fix everything, right? I'll read it to you.
Yeah.
You have a big book. Do you have a big book?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. I'm going to give you the answer we all need to hear. Okay, page 61. In the middle of paragraph, right? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind, right? That's you walking around telling other people, right? Giving them helpful information, right? Which nobody asked for, right? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? And is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages well? That's been taught to us ever since we achieved consciousness around the age of 2, right? That we have to go out, get a job, have a better resume so we get the job, have a better, body so we get the girl, have a better look so we, are accepted by our peers, right? You're trying to change reality in order to get some sort of satisfaction inside. We cast that model aside. It says it's a delusion. Did you hear me say that it's a delusion? That I read it right out of the book, Sarah?
Yeah.
So, okay, that's a deluded state. We don't want to do that anymore. So we go the opposite of what it says on page 63. We stay close to performance work well. We stand by ready to chime in when we're needed. What I was going to ask you before is, did they ask for help? Yes or no? If no, then don't get involved. If yes, then do get involved. But if they're your children, or now we're of the age we're starting to take care of our parents, something that you have a responsibility about, then the natural order is you do have, to become involved. Is the person a subordinate of yours in business? Then it is your job to get involved. But outside of that, right, that's where you're not staying in your lane. If it's somebody who works for you, yes, it is appropriate for you to give them criticism, commentary, pointers, right? But if it's your sister, right, she doesn't take kindly to that, just like you don't when somebody gets into your business.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Great. Thank you. Yeah.
And that's not what God wants from us. that's the whole thing. When I stopped doing that, I just told you my story. I struggled with that for 50 years. I still struggle with it. And the thing is, but when I started to pull back on that and identify areas where I wasn't necessarily, my reliance on God got greater. God's going to take care of it, even though I think I got to say something, right? I got to, if a kid is about to walk across the street and you got to like tell him, don't do that, that is a reason to be involved. Beyond that or something like that, where you're just, if you're going to tell somebody, you shouldn't get back to that ex-girlfriend, right? Even though you see it, they don't see it. If they ask you what your opinion is, great. If they don't ask you, then you just let it go. Support them. I hope it works out well, right? Really, I'm telling you, because first of all, it doesn't work. And the second thing is we're not doing God's work. We're trying to manage things again. And then we get disappointed when the results don't go our way. All right, Halima?
Hi, Joseph. Yeah, it's just, it's something I struggle with as well. I've got, for example, some fellows, if they'd call me and kind of share about how their day's going, they're complaining about the day and everything like that. I do understand, it's not my place to say anything. In those situations, would you recommend to just remain silent while they talk about their day, or if they're complaining or anything like that?
They're complaining. Yeah, not to remain silent. There's a way of being in, it's called active feedback, right? Of like, you don't have to change their point of view if you don't have a horse in this, if they're not a sponsee or something you have responsibility for or whatever, they didn't ask for a solution, then relate your experience. This is what I do, right? I'm kind of like tongue in cheek, right? So you're complaining let's say you relate a story where you're complaining, right? I'll say, you know what? I used to be just like you, man. I used to see everything as negative and this and that. When I started to release my character defects, the world started to turn sunny. Then they're going to say, really? How did you do that? Right? Now they turn the conversation to how I transcended it. But I'm not pointing, I'm not saying the reason why, if I were to tell them stop doing that, it doesn't work, right? You have to, all you do is you lay the spiritual tools at their feet, right? You've heard this phrase, right?
Yeah.
So to say, you know what? I used to be just like you. I used to live in a world that was just, threatening and difficult and everything like that, and when I started to trusting God more, I felt better about myself, this and that. Now, if they're spiritually active, they'll ask you, how did you accomplish that? If they're not interested, they'll just say, you know what? Oh, okay. You push. They won't want to talk to you, right? Yeah. Just like people who are actively drinking don't want to talk to sober alcoholics. People who are red meat eaters don't want to talk to vegans, right? Because they make them uncomfortable. And you've probably seen a table, right, where somebody reveals that they're a vegetarian or whatever, and then everybody at the table, meat eaters, have to justify why they're eating meat. How do you get your protein, right? They have to interrogate them. Nobody can let it go. It's the same thing here. If you present my lifestyle, right, I live happy, joyous, and free today, and this and that. If they're interested in that, they'll ask you, right? But you don't have to comment on their lifestyle and say what they are is bad or wrong unless they ask, or they're a sponsee, right, or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, no problem. Oh, anybody else? Are we good? All right. So I think that's it. So I'll end with this as far as like what the model is, or what I tried to present today was, we naturally will gravitate towards being godly people, right? The difference between me and a saint isn't that he has more of something than I do. It's that he has less of character defects, right? Somebody who's exhibiting saintly behavior or whatever it is, right? It says we're not saints in the big book, but somebody who's really self-actualized. It's not that they went and piled on more information. We thought that because that's the way we were educated, right? You got to go to school and get education in this and that. So we think that that's the same thing here. That is not the case. We're not here to get information. That's why people want to go to a bunch of meetings and listen, but they don't do anything, right? They don't get a sponsor. They don't do anything. They don't change. Because the thing is, we're here to get rid of certain things, to get rid of our character defects. First, to awaken to the idea that it really is our character defects that we're at work, that caused our difficulties, which caused us to drink. And the second thing is come to step 6, became willing to let go of them. if you're not letting go of your character defects, right? I just was talking with Karen right in front of you guys, right? There comes a point where you have to be willing to let go of that. I want to be right. I want to be this. I want to be that. Right. And you say to yourself, you know what? It doesn't serve me any longer. But the thing is that, if you have the 12 and 12, or I can send it to you if somebody's interested, get in touch with me through Karen. But we talked about an awakening that happens in step 4, that's mentioned in the 12 and 12. So we used to think that we shall claim that our serious character defects, if we think we have any at all, have been caused chiefly by excessive drinking, right? That's what I thought. I was a bad guy because I drank, right? That's not the case. I drank because I was a bad guy, because I was exhibiting my character defects, because I had difficulty with relationships, because I was selfish and self-centered. That being so, we think it logically follows that sobriety, first lesson all time, is the only thing we need to work for. That is not true. That's a delusion, right? I'm not just working to stay clean today. I want to pursue those promises that are on page 83, 84, 133, the happy, joys, and free. We believe that our one-time good characters will be revived when we quit the moment we quit alcohol. That is not the case, right? We've all stopped drinking. We put the plug in the jug, whatever, right? But then we still struggle with traffic. We struggle with obnoxious people. We struggle with economic downturn, right? We struggle with fears, whatever it is. But there was an awakening that we've come to, that we realize that that our character defects representing instincts gone astray have been the primary cause of drinking and failure all his life. This is on page 50 in the 12 and 12. So this is the thing we're really battling against today, right? None of us who showed up clean today have a drinking problem. You don't have a drinking problem, right? People in rehab who've been there for 30 days don't have alcohol in their system, don't have drugs in their system. Why don't they just leave after 30 days? Because they have another problem called alcoholism, which is alive and well. Right. And if that's not getting treated, then when they get out on the street, they're going to go back to drinking or using or whatever it is. So this is on page 50, and it's coming to tell us by now the newcomer has probably arrived at the following conclusion, right? This is the great awakening that we should experience, that his character defects representing instincts gone astray have been the primary cause of his drinking and his failure at life. That unless he is now willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, both sobriety and peace of mind will elude him. That's scary, right? If you've been hanging around the rooms for more than a year or whatever, and you're not having these things, if you're not getting peace of mind, there's a reason for that, right? It says, that if you're not willing to work hard at the elimination of the worst of these defects, well, sobriety and peace of mind will elude us, right? So that's the thing. I encourage everybody to, come onto this idea that really our character defect, it was never them, right? Sarah, it was, Karen. It was never, they weren't the problem, right? I have to come to terms with I was the problem. I'm really open about that, me personally, right? That I'm the primary cause, that, my troubles are of my own making. If I'm having a bad day, there's something wrong with me. My first sponsor said to me, if the first 3 people you meet in the morning are jerks, Joseph, the problem is you. And that was like weird for me to hear. And I was like, how do you know who I'm going to meet in the morning? But he was saying, statistically speaking, you're not going to meet 3 jerks in a row, right? The problem is how you're looking at them, right? And that's the thing, is like, if I want to have a good day, it will be a good day. If I want to open my mind and say that this is what, Karen, I was actually, giving you something that, I also struggle with. If I start labeling people as, they don't know what they're talking about, or they're short-sighted, or they're jerks, then I can't get information from them. And then that cuts me off from a valuable resource in the world. Right. So, I was just, coaching you to say to her, maybe she could say something that could value. Maybe God's trying to get you a message that isn't coming through any other channel. You never know. I struggle with that also. Sometimes the information that's very valuable and relevant for me comes through the mouth of somebody that I dislike, or that I didn't see as a source of information prior to. We live in a pretty, beautiful world, but it's going to be our character defects that are going to limit us. Right. And the quicker and more that we shed them, if you shed them a little at a time, work towards them, right, you'll have a more authentic experience in this world. And I pray that a year from now, right, you have problems in areas that right now you don't even have areas. All right. With teenagers.
So with that, thank you. I will thank you, Joseph O. Thank you for always being ready, willing, and able. I truly admire you and your willingness to serve. that is a testament to the humility of people who are actively working in this program, who know that when they're tapped on the shoulder, they're up to bat. I pray for all of you that you emulate that humility and service and bring that into your life, because you will reap the dividends. As they say, it will keep you sober,
Right.
happy, joyous, and free. With that, I thank you, Joseph. Maybe put your number in the chat. I'm pretty sure most people know you. You're pretty famous, but in case they don't, they could be in touch with you. If anyone wants to share on Reco12, please hit me up, be in touch with me. I'm available. If you feel you need a sponsor, I know people who are wanting to sponsor at the moment. I'm personally booked. I'm sure Joseph knows of people who actively sponsor and work with programs. So let us know. We work with people who want this with the desperation of a drowning man. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to wish everyone a beautiful day. And Joseph, will you pray us out?
Oh, yeah, sure. After a moment of silence for the alcoholic and addict inside and outside of these rooms who continues to suffer, please join me in the we version of the Serenity Prayer. God, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, courage to change the things we can, wisdom to know the difference.
Standing still a moment, carving out this time, reflecting on the landscape of this life of mine. Peaks too high to conquer, streams too wide to cross, troughs too deep to walk through without incurring loss. Yet here I am, still standing tall, despite the rough terrain. One like me survived the storms and walked through wind and rain. Still standing, I will fight the good fight, still searching for glimmers of light, feet still on the ground. I can still be found, standing still.
My wings are torn and tattered, but I know I still can fly. I may not soar unfettered, I may not rise too high.
Recorded in the book of life and bind it with the seal